All right. Welcome back to All Cars, y'all. My name is John. It is time for another Motorweek Retro Review reaction. This week, it is the 1985 Ford LTD. Now, this was recommended to me by one of my viewers. Thank you. I've said before, I do make note of these. I won't promise I do them, and I won't promise how quick a turnaround would be on them. But this is a car I should have done probably a long time ago. With my love of some 80s cars, I've talked about the K cars a lot, and certainly the Buick Regals and Oldsmobile Cutlass Supremes and things like that. This fits in perfectly, kind of with all of that, and, it's a car I was always interested in back in the day. So, as always, grab your beverage of choice. We've got some caffeine today. Get comfortable in your chair, and let's take a little trip down to 1985 and look at a Ford LTD. And I'm going to apologize in advance. I hope you still like me and the channel after this one.
Motorweek is made possible by Lucas Oil and TireRack.com.
Over the last decade, most American buyers have had more than a passing interest in economy. And that usually meant light front-wheel drive cars with 4- and 6-cylinder engines. But there are still plenty of V8 holdouts, mainly America's highway patrol officers. But a funny thing happened on the way to chasing speeders. Some folks in Dearborn found that civilians wanted to even things up. So here comes one of Ford's latest ideas, the LTD LX. Okay, are we really going to call the Ford LTD LX a sports sedan? Or is Ford just trying to get the most out of their already spent investment dollars with yet another throwback model? I mean, if you've ever driven a traditional big Ford, you probably think that sports sedan and LTD are mutually exclusive. LTD. Now that stands for overboosted, dead as a doornail, power steering, and wallowy ride, right? True once, but not in this LTD.
I always thought it stood for limited. Before they go on, let's jump into the styling here. And I need to give you some framework before I jump into it. In the late 80s, early 90s, I was needing to buy another car to replace my first Jeep. And I wanted something kind of in this class, right? In this category. I considered something like a K car, but got turned off on them from some reliability concerns from people I'd talked to. I ended up buying 83 Buick Regal, and it was okay. You know, I've said before, it had transmission problems, several. And I looked at this, and so I can say from 30 years ago, I just think this is an ugly car. And it's interesting because if you sit down and we talk, and you've been on the channel before, and we talk about, here's what I like in these old cars, right? I kind of miss angular styling. I kind of miss, front engine, maybe rear drive, mid-sized cars. This absolutely should hit most of what I like. In fact, if you and I were to sit back to back and I was to describe a car, or to describe my 83 Regal, this might very well be what you ended up sketching out. But it's just ugly to me. It's the proportions are wrong. The wheelbase looks too short. The cab looks too far set back. Just lots of cuts in the styling, and you end up with something that looks like it was cobbled together with no sense of real style at all. I don't want to be overly critical of it, but I don't like it. I think about Audi of the time, think about what Buick or Oldsmobile was doing at the time, and then look at this greenhouse of, the triangular window, a regular window, the B-pillar, another window, a cut, and then the back glass. I mean, it's just super busy, and the whole thing looks like it's set back on the rear wheels. Not an attractive car. Looks very, very oddly proportioned, like a bigger car put on a small wheelbase.
LX. Even the standard LTD is not a typical big is better Ford. Based on the same downsized Fairmont Granada chassis that spawned the current Mustang and Thunderbird, Ford has already proved that rear-drive cars can compete in a front-drive world. This LTD LX answers to the helm like no big Ford sedan before. Firm steering and a controlled ride that makes a good run at rivaling Germany's best in response and feel. Take your favorite twisty road and the LTD LX is eager to prove that it's no boat. The smoky-inspired suspension is stiff. The shocks are gas-filled and the stabilizer bars thicker than on the plebeian LTDs. The result, little body roll and only a manageable amount of front scrub under hard cornering. Goodyear Eagle GT tires.
But before they go on to any more test track, what a very positive review of the suspension, comparing it to positively, right, to German cars of the time. I wouldn't have expected that. I would have expected competent, but maybe a little wallowy, not quite as positive as they said.
Tires help keep everything sticking to the terra firma. Combined with the Thunderbird's 4-bar link coil spring rear suspension, they keep the tail from providing too much of its own steering input until plenty of warning is given. And that we found on a wet and icy track. But even though the LTD LX might do well on an alpine adventure, it's also going to be happy doing a remake of Thunder Road. The unmistakable rumble from the chrome tailpipes tells the tale. Ford has stuffed the latest version of the old 302 iron block V8 under hood. It's actually only 4.9 liters in displacement, but 5 even looks much better on the 2-arm air cleaner. It feeds a twin throttle body fuel injection system, a concession to modern times, for output of 165 horsepower and 245 pounds of torque, and that peak torque occurs at only 2,000 RPM. So
interesting. I take issue here with Ford's nomenclature on this, saying it's the LTD LX, where LX tends to mean more luxury. That's how I've always considered it, except in maybe Hondas, where LX was kind of the mid-level on something, but more of luxury, not the sportier version. I don't have a problem with the engine, necessarily. We used to joke when I was a teenager that Ford took their 4.9 liter and rounded up to 5.0 because, well, you're probably just going to have to rebuild it anyway. And once you do, it'll be a 5 liter. So, maybe unfair, but overall, I don't have a problem with the engine. It's okay. Throttle body injection, 5 liters, 160 horsepower. It's not exactly exciting to me. Those numbers are not exciting by itself. But at the time, it was a Mustang engine, right? It was a competitive engine. I guess looking back, I remember it fondly, but it's not like I loved it. I guess that's what I'm thinking.
Potent power band from idle to well past legal speeds. 0 to 60 takes a fast 8.7 seconds. And with suspension upgrades and the LX's standard traction lock rear end, there's less wheel hop on fast starts than we found on a lot of earlier high-performance efforts from Ford. A fast quarter mile was clicked off too, 16.5 seconds at 81, and that reads well for a 4-speed automatic in anyone's hot car catalog. Passing as expected, also a breeze. With crisp downshifts, the LTD LX took only 3.6 neck-snapping seconds from 40 to 55 miles per hour. We ran all our tests in dry weather too, so we can attest to good braking in the LTD LX whatever the weather. Despite traditional Ford nosedive, again less than before, stops were straight and not grabby. We did notice the power-assisted disc drum system had a fairly spongy-feeling pedal, but distances from 55 of only 124 feet indicate a very sound system to us. While
before they go on any more, kind of impressive. This is the overwhelming thing I keep watching here is, man, if you know what you're doing, you do a couple of tweaks here and you've got a sleeper. You've got a 4-door Mustang, basically. It's based on the same platform and engine and everything else, and those results are really good. It would be interesting to go back, because I know I did one of these reaction videos to an Audi. I think it was about this vintage. I don't really remember, but it would be interesting to go back and look at some of those other cars from the same vintage, same era here in 85 or so, and look and see what they were doing in terms of their 0 to 60s. But overall here, you know, whether it was through the slalom or whether just it was accelerated, it didn't look like it was doing much of anything. But then the numbers seemed to back up that it was performing very well. Very, very interesting to me. And I want to end with that braking performance was extremely good. They said the pedal was spongy, but really good braking performance. I would say at this moment, I am quietly impressed with this car.
The LTD LX has a cop engine, cop suspension, and cop tires. It has a Euro flavor appearance that a true low-bid John Law model can only envy. Trim is laid back, with dark headlight inserts and red accents all around. The 70 series rubber comes on 14-inch road wheels with unusual rubber lug covers. Inside, charcoal cloth promotes a seriously eerie look. It makes the LTD LX seem much smaller and more intimate than it really is. Ford's excellent sports seats, complete with 6-way power adjustments for the driver, are standard on the LX. The cushions are low and supportive, with a hand bulb to control the inflatable lumbar backrest support. A floor shifter for the locked-up torque converter automatic is also included. We like this slush box. And we like the steering wheel buttons of Ford's optional cruise control too, but the inverted V-shaped spokes of the Toyota-style wheel are badly out of place in a car where a firm grip is essential. Likewise, last year's Turbo T-Bird gauge package that gives only speed and RPM. It couldn't cost that much more to put the 85 Thunderbird's rally cluster, one of the best around, in here too. Long distance attributes.
Okay, before they go on, because we need to talk about the interior, I have extremely mixed feelings about that. On the one hand, the seats look wonderful. I love how low the gear shift mounting was. And it's so weird looking back to see these cars and not have cup holders, right? Because cup holders are so ubiquitous everywhere here today. But the fact that this did not have a column shifter to open up that floor space where you could buy go to Pep Boys and buy the trash can holder with 2 cup holders and put it down on the carpet. More sports sedan had an armrest right there, which they didn't talk about. Looks a little far back, but at least probably you have a cubby in there. But then again, for that all being kind of European feeling, they end up with that still linear dash, lots of plastic cuts and pieces all right there. I've talked a lot on the channel about when you look at what the Japanese started to do after this period, after 85, the big one-piece plastic casting. So you didn't have pieces rubbing and squeaking against each other. This, again, looks like an American manufacturer that still didn't know what they wanted to do. They were competing in the mid-80s, but still trying to hold on to that more linear dashboard of like the 70s. And then the radio and HVAC controls just kind of stuck down there. At least it was in a little pod, but could have been angled towards the drive, up a little bit, angled like this instead of more vertical, right? Mixed feelings, including the door panels. This car seems to check boxes in terms of power and handling and ride and comfort, performance, ability, but missing the undefinables that make it classic or thoughtfully designed. It feels kind of cobbled together, but still performs okay. Interesting.
also got mixed reviews. It may be very quiet, only 64 decibels at 55, but feeling every expansion joint gets tiring. Also, we found EPA mileage ratings of 16 city and 22 highway, as well as our own test result of 18, to be a bit low. Still, this is not an economy car. Nevertheless, it is a 6-passenger bargain. The LTD LX starts at $11,421. Air conditioning and a premium sound system are the single biggest items responsible for our test car's $13,795 final tag. Indeed, this is a true sports sedan by any measure. The Ford LTD LX is a well-balanced package of both European and American virtues. It has satisfying V8 power, plus the handling that discerning drivers demand. While missing a few of the refinements of its transoceanic rivals, it also has public affordability. And when you cruise up behind unsuspecting drivers, they almost always let you pass. Although for the life of us, we can't figure out why.
All right, that was a pretty funny ending there. Very interesting. So, wrapping back to where I started, I was looking for another car, and I'd had good experience with Buick before, so I ended up just getting a Buick. But more importantly, I remember looking at LTDs, because certainly I wouldn't have gotten this one, and their complaint about feeling all the expansion joints largely would have gone away if you got a more basic level. But I just remember not liking the car. And I can't give any specifics. This was a long time ago now. But it was a general, ew, it's ugly. Just, I didn't like the look of the car versus my two-door Regal that I got, which I still love the body style of. This is just visually a train wreck. I can't get over it. From the front, it honestly looks like a Chevy Celebrity to me. Built on an older platform, and it seemed to do everything. It seemed to be competent. But here's a car that I just, watching this as it started to wrap up, I started to question, like, how great would this have been if it had a better body on it? Because it's not a bad performer. I think Ford really missed something here with this car. This feels less cohesive than almost anything that came out from GM or even Chrysler at the time, styling wise, and to a lesser extent, the interior just looks like a huge missed opportunity, as far as I can tell, in a package that probably doesn't get the respect it deserves. Maybe that's fair for the way it actually performed. You know, if you think about the LTD and you talk to people who remember LTDs, if you ask them if they associate sports sedan with it, I'd be willing to bet 95 out of 100 would say no. But here it is. So, I don't know. Mixed feelings. I still don't like the car. I still think the proportions are wrong. I think it's ugly. I think it's cut up. I think it's a very poor attempt by Ford, and feels really thrown together, very quickly thrown together, as a matter of fact. But ends up being an okay performer. It'd be fascinating to drive one again. I don't think I would get over the styling. I don't think I'd suddenly decide in person, oh my gosh, it's beautiful. But it would be interesting to drive one again. The end result for me personally in the real world was, I thought Buick and GM, Oldsmobile, had a better product. And that's what I ended up buying. So thanks for being here, y'all. If you ever had one, let me know what you think below, but I appreciate you being here and I look forward to hearing from you.